Hi, I'm Nicole Reinecke, and I'm here with Meaghan Reinecke, and we're going to talk about sustainable AI agent design. Megan actually came up with this research idea a few months ago, and as soon as she said it, my brain just lit up. Why don't you tell everybody why you came up with it?
Hi, Nicole. Thank you for having me. I like the Team Reinecke, Team
Right,
Reinecke,
Reinecke
Team
all the
Reinecke.
way?
It's great. So there were a few things going on in my brain actually when I was thinking about how the things that I wanted to talk about regarding sustainability and the sort of the explosion and proliferation of AI tools and use. And so one of the things that really concerned me was the environmental impact. What does this mean when we're talking about resource consumption, carbon footprint, the impact? What kind of impact will this time have for future generations? I was also thinking about resources in terms of enterprise resources and just sort of the cognitive load that we are starting to introduce to our enterprises when we see the again proliferation of software tools. Does it have documentation? Do we have governance? And are we simply just creating these sort of sponges that just suck and suck and that are not intentional about their resource consumption? And so between the human and the psychological aspect and the green aspect and sustainability impact, those were some of the things that I think we have design tools that can help us make better choices
Mm,
for the stuff that we are building now. And I do truly believe that most of us want to make those choices, but we just don't think about them in the moment, which sort of led us to how could we take a practitioner's approach to, sustainable agent design.
yeah, I completely agree. When we're making these agents, it's so easy to do that we forget about the blast radius of them, right? We talk a lot about the security blast radius, but the actual resource consumption radius is enormous. And we can break it down into some really specific parts, which got exciting when we started really looking into this, because we have things like the execution frequency, the scope and the context around the business information, right? What are the boundaries of action, the execution path, and where the compute's coming from, and the life cycle and governance, right? All of those things really drive to that consumption. When we started talking about execution frequency, you came up with this really cool idea about how we can design it and show people in a way that's going to prompt them to make informed choices. Do you want to talk a little bit through your thinking process there?
Sure, absolutely. So very much like I was saying is, I do believe that, we as practitioners, as builders, designers, and just generally humans, we would like to be able to make those choices were they offered to us in the moment if we were thinking about them in context. In general, we know from UX best practice, help in context is a best practice. So these are the ability to make these kinds of configurations in the moment, then actually alleviate that burden. We don't force that thinking to the designers and the builders. They don't have to think about it on their own. And then one of the parts that I love about this is that the more that the enterprise and some of the governance folks put those templates in place, it prompts the question, it creates a little bit of friction so that we're making better choices.
Yeah, we
Should we
usually
take a
talk
look
about
at some?
removing friction, but in this
Right.
case, right, to make important decisions obvious and prominent, we actually want to introduce friction. So inside our white paper, we identify really good points of friction to include to make smarter, less consumptive choices. Yeah, I'd love to. Let's show everybody a picture of it.
Here, and this is just one of several that we put in throughout the paper, just to sort of get us thinking. In fact, I'm sure that some of you may even have other ones that you've come across that would also be great ideas. So a run cadence, so for example, if were these configuration options to show while you are building an agent, right? So you name your agent, you talk about what it's going to do, and then there are all of these options where you talk about, how often it's going to run and how much resources it's going to consume. And that's all part of the configuration steps of every agent. So on demand, which is a manual execution only, time-based versus event-triggered. So you can start to think about, when things are going to be running, a trigger condition, and even some small design choices, right? So if we have state change rules, here we can highlight that's a recommended condition. And we've obviously colored it in green. We have some key points about resource consumption. There's 0 idle resource consumption at that time, but you get an instant response rate. Versus on the polling side, we're highlighting that as a resource intensive condition. And it's continuously checking for changes at regular intervals. And it's really doing a lot, is much higher in terms of constant resource usage. And of course, this one is also a nice favorite. As being a working parent, sleep windows are important. This is when it should be asleep, and this is when it should be awake.
Yeah.
And these are just some of the things that if you prompt them in the moment, and you kind of highlight, well, this one is a little bit greener, this one is less resource intensive, you can kind of help steer the conversation.
Yeah, I love that. And there are so many reasons why you would choose one over the other. And when we're building agents, we don't often think ahead of time and say, well, how do we actually make this run only when it's necessary? Or can we actually batch things together? And if we do, does that save us time and resources? So that's really important. I love that. One
Mm-hmm.
of the other ones that is sort of a personal passion of mine is around where it's executing things.
Mm-hmm.
So to date, when people are putting together agents, they really have relied heavily on those large language models and on those centrally hosted large language models. So part of that execution path and compute routing capability that we researched and you have a screen for is
Yep.
all about, can we use the resource that's closest to the data and provides the capabilities that you need with the minimum resource consumption. And as Olama gets better and these small models get better and better, you can actually start to even consider running local models to perform those activities. And those models can be co-located on your hosted device or
Yep.
in your laptop, even in many cases. And
Right.
so if we put those options on the screen, and thank you for pulling that up,
Mm-hmm.
you can actually really consider that location and make much more informed resource choosing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And even, we're starting to see this, I think, in some of even the consumer models of some of the places that we're using, like, you can see which model Copilot wants to use because you can select between Chat and Haiku and whatever else. Claude does the same. And we're starting to see little bits of it, but I think one of the things that I like about the way you and I attacked it was, we really went holistic, and we really have a lot here. I think we're giving a lot of optimism to our builders and our practitioners to say, I think you actually want to make these choices, because I think that agents designed using models and configurations like these will actually make your life better in the future and will make your users' lives better in the future. And ultimately, that is
Yeah.
what we're building, right? We're building things to that our future selves say, hey, thanks, that was great, I'm really glad you did that.
Thank you for
And
making
so,
an informed choice.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So those are
And
some of the things that make me really passionate about this stuff.
I love that. As part of supporting that is that life cycle and governance capability as well.
Hmm.
When you build an agent or when you start an agent, you have to think with a death date in mind, right? So you shouldn't be just deploying agents that live forever. You should be deploying agents that have an anticipated end date or review date and make that explicit so you just don't have these rogue processes running. A lot of us have stuff up and running in the ether that we don't remember creating. So it's really important to us
Hmm.
that you really think about that kind of governance, and good governance is actually also really sustainable, just fun.
Agreed.
And then the other part of that is around constraints. So that's another really fun one. I'd love to talk about the red and green
Yeah.
capabilities. So one of the concepts that exist is this concept of green AI.
Yeah.
And in the literature, green AI really refers to sustainable choices within the processing or use of AI. But we can actually extend that metaphor to include something called red AI, which is like, what are the behaviors that are the opposite of sustainability? Do you
Mhm.
want to show us a few examples of that?
Exactly. Well, it's a great theme that I think Nicole, you did a fantastic job of weaving this through the paper, where we introduce here at the beginning green AI versus red AI. And this is at the beginning, we're just going to talk about it in a very generic sense, where exactly what Nicole was saying, green AI is about lower resource consumption through the design choices, balances performance with sustainability. But one of the other things that I really like is it really values proportional and contextual intelligence. And then we compare and contrast that to red AI, which most of us just assume is actually just red, is just AI, not red or green, just AI. But there is a high cost. There is a high carbon footprint. Performance is number one. And it's not that sometimes it's prioritized over sustainability, but frankly, it's mostly just because we're not really thinking about sustainability. We're just
Yeah.
prioritizing performance. And it applies this always on, all the time design simply by default, simply because we haven't given our users explicit choices. And so we introduce this theme here, but then I'm just going to scroll a little bit here for one of the examples. And we talk about, as we've been talking about, say, run cadence, trigger conditions, what have you. And then in each section, we're going to summarize some of the key characteristics that are green AI versus red AI to try to make that comparison a little bit more elaborate and give you real examples, and then also provide a checklist where here are some great rules of thumb that you can consider when you're designing screens for users to design agents.
Yeah, so if you're interested in more of these details, we are going to put the link to the white paper right below. It was so much fun doing this work with you, Meaghan. Thank you so much for sharing the idea and for going through and doing this research. I think it's important for everybody.
I look forward to doing more of this with you, Nicole. Team Reinecke all the way.
Renegades.